From Wimbledon to the Euros, mass sport gatherings have brought us back together as a nation.
But with new data from Public Health Scotland showing almost 2,000 Scottish fans tested positive for COVID after attending Euros games, is sport, or indeed you could argue any big gathering, really safe? We're joined by the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng. Good to see you this morning. We're all still riding high at the moment because we haven't had another game yet on England's success, aren't we? And hoping for it to come. So everyone's very excited about the Euros. Is there a danger that in that excitement and in our urge to get businesses back on track and to get everyone out and about, we are letting safety slip? I'm talking about those statistics for Scottish fans. There's some 1,300 that came down to London for that match, excuse me, have been since tested positive. And another nearly 2,000 who attended Euros events have since tested positive. So there must be a tension between wanting to get back to normal and safety.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's always this tension, isn't there, between wanting to get back to normality, but also wanting, as every government should want, to protect our citizens. And I think there's always a balance to be struck here. What I would say, though, is that clearly, in our case, the vaccine rollout has been successful. I looked at the numbers this morning. I think there have been 44 million first doses. And clearly, more and more people having the second dose does give a strong degree of protection against the coronavirus and its variants.
Well, publicans will be very happy to hear about it because they are pushing to stop limited capacity for the Euros, saying that they want people to have the chance to shout and cheer. Would you support that?
Well, look, I think we've got to try and observe social distancing. We've got to try and keep people safe. So just because lots of people are congregated in a way that isn't socially distanced doesn't mean that we should simply abandon all those social distancing guidelines.
So is that a no then? Because what they're specifically saying is they want to increase the capacity that are allowed in for the Euros and relax that pressure on making people not shout and talk too much, the restrictions that we also have on singing in public places. Would you support that then?
I think the restrictions are there for a reason and they should be observed for the time being. Clearly on the 19th of July things might change, but we've got to keep to the restrictions as they are.
What is going to happen on the 19th of July? What's the situation there? Is it everything completely and utterly back to normal then?
I hope so, but I always say when I'm asked this that we've got to look at the numbers, we've got to look at the evidence a week before. So a week before the 19th will be the 12th of July, that's in a couple of weeks. And government ministers and officials will take a decision looking at the evidence at that time. I can't predict, unfortunately, what that will look like.
Well, you're not the health secretary, but apparently the health secretary can predict. He was only in the job 24 hours, and this is what he had to say.
I want to see those restrictions lifted as soon as we can, as quickly as possible. In terms of the roadmap to that, you'll have to wait for my statement to Parliament later today.
Irreversible is...
Oh, it's going to be irreversible. There's no going back.
Kwasi Kwarteng, this idea that these restrictions are irreversible, what does Sajid Javid know that we don't? Is he then convinced that there will be no more variants and that the vaccine that we are taking protects us against all future variants to come? So as soon as he's lifted the restrictions, whenever that might be, supposedly the 19th of July, there is no going back. That's what he's told us. So is that right?
So what he said, and I listened very carefully to the clip, what he said was that I want to see the restrictions lifted. We all want to see that. But he also said that, we've got to look at the evidence. So I think there's a balanced approach. Obviously, we want to see the 19th of July come and then we can reopen fully. But we can't guarantee it 3 weeks or 4 weeks before.
It was clear that it was irreversible, so when it does come and when he makes that statement. So he's not giving himself a lot of wiggle room then, is he, if something happens in the autumn or later in the summer?
Well, Sajid is very clear that he wants to reopen and doesn't want to impose another lockdown, and we're all very determined not to do that.
So let me ask you, it's very clear, though. Once he has opened up the restrictions, are you saying there will be no going back, or should we be prepared that July the 19th we might have some restrictions lifted, but come the winter we might have to have another lockdown? Is that a possibility? We don't want it. I'm not saying we want it, of course no one wants it, but is that a possibility?
So, as you know, I've been on the show a number of times. I never give any guarantees. I'm not going to say there is no likelihood whatsoever, and I'm going to rule out every lockdown that happens. We don't know. There might be new variants. There might be new situations. All I can say is that I think that's very, very unlikely.
Yeah. So why are you more circumspect than Sajid Javid? Is it just because he was in the first flush of excitement of a new job?
I don't know. I mean, Sajid is a great friend. He's a great public servant. He's very clear and focused and determined. And I think he's doing a really good job in his first week as Health Secretary. But we probably have slightly different styles, but we're trying to do the same thing.
Sorry,
no, go on, Kate.
No, well, what would convince you then to take off your mask and feel confident? Because you've already highlighted the success of the vaccination campaign. We know certain markers have already been reached. What is the data that you will be given that makes you think, yeah, that's coming off, I feel absolutely confident now, I'm going to go on Good Morning Britain, not be circumspect and be completely confident to say the mask is coming off?
So let's get to the 19th of July, or rather the 12th of July. We'll make a decision on whether to open up, and then there'll be other guidelines, there'll be guidance as well, and I would follow that every time.
Okay.
Well, the thing is you're waiting for the 19th of July, but that's not really answering the question of what will be the decision. Will it simply be somebody telling you it's now safe? Will it be the Health Secretary telling you it's now safe?
Yeah, I tend to...
You'll listen to his advice?
Of course. I'm not a medical expert, and very few people watching this programme are, and I think people naturally are going to listen to expert advice. They're going to see what the guidelines are and generally follow them. That's what people do in this country.
I suppose the problem for businesses is the guidelines, and indeed for schools. The guidelines are constantly changing, aren't they? And it's all very well for you to be able to wait for the 19th of July. It might very well be possible for me to. But it's not possible for people that are trying to plan a strategy in a business. And I know that's what you're there to talk about a little bit more, where you are this morning with Nissan and Sunderland. What do people do? What do schools do? What do businesses do if they just don't know where they're going to be on the 19th of July? For instance, would you support getting rid of bubbles in schools and closing them early?
So you're quite right. I mean, it's not quite the 19th because we'll make the decision on the 12th of July, but you're absolutely right to say it is a matter of uncertainty, and of course it is. I mean, it's a pandemic. We haven't lived through this. We haven't responded to a situation like this ever before. So there's an element of uncertainty, and it's difficult really to have a full map and a full picture of exactly what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. There's always that element. My job is to talk to businesses, as I am doing, and trying to give an assurance that we're not going to lock down forever and that we want to get back to normal life as soon as it's safe to do so.
Can you explain another thing that's come out this week, that certain executives in the world of business will be exempt from quarantine and isolation, and it just feels like another rule for some people, for those that have the money and the wealth and the ability to be able to say, well, I'm just chairing a meeting in London or in Milan, I need to be there. And it seems to be one rule for them and another rule for the others. Why is there such disparity in the guidance?
I think it's, again, a very difficult issue to debate. Within government, I was very much for having very limited number of exceptions for people, and we haven't mentioned Nissan or Sunderland, where I am today, but for people coming in who are investing hundreds of millions, billions of pounds. And it's not just the money. It's about jobs. It's about economic opportunity. It's about the ability for people to earn good wages and look after their families and their loved ones. And I think that's important. And the other thing that we've got to remember in this is that there's an international context. I was reading 2 weeks ago about President Macron, who was inviting a number of executives to invest in Paris. They had all these exemptions. And I was thinking, here in Britain, we've got to compete with that. We've got to make Britain as attractive, at least, as France for inward investors. And it's in that context that a number of very limited exceptions, and I was very keen to stress that there would be a limited number of exceptions, people coming from companies like Nissan investing huge amounts of money in the northeast and other parts of our country, and there would be exceptional circumstances. I know it's difficult, it sounds unfair, but when there are thousands of jobs at stake, as business secretary, I felt I had to make a stand on that.
All right. Just before you go, we want to show an image here. This is an image of the Ukrainian cabinet ministers. This is from yesterday. They're all dressed in their Ukrainian football shirts ahead of the quarter-final on Saturday night, being very patriotic there, supporting their national team. We know how much patriotism matters to this cabinet. Could we see similar pictures? Will we see the British government, the cabinet team, all in England tops to show their support behind the English team?
I'm not sure I would want to see some of my colleagues in England shirts necessarily. But obviously you don't have to wear an England shirt to be patriotic and wish our national team the best success.
Of course not. Have you got an England shirt?
I had one many, many years ago. I mean, my England shirt-wearing days are long past, unfortunately.
Can I just ask you very quickly before you go? We talked earlier on, actually, I was at Wembley. I don't know whether you were. I was at Wembley, and they were booing the German national anthem. What would be your advice to football fans who, looking ahead to the quarter-final, semi-final particularly, will be at Wembley and behaviour like that, just before you go?
I think it's completely unacceptable, frankly. A national anthem is something of great pride. Most of us take our national anthem very seriously indeed, and we would be appalled if people were booing.
The same with booing the knee? What about booing the knee?
I think we should. I don't think people should be booed. I wouldn't boo people for taking the knee or anything of that. If they're expressing their own views, they should be allowed to do that.
OK, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to see you in an England shirt, so that's what I'm putting forward to. I'll get one sent to you straight away. In a size that fits.
I think I had one in the 1982.
Well, there
I think I had one in the 1982 World Cup.
We'll see if we can find that.
Good to talk to you this morning. Good to talk to you this morning.